And it's Carne, still in quarantine. Quarantine Con Carne, sponsored tonight by C&H Financial Services. My guest today, he is the owner of Bloodshot Records. He is Rob Miller. Bloodshot Records, 26-ish years in existence, a Chicago institution, an alt country, insurgent country, defiant roots institution. Thank you for doing this.
You are too kind to have me.
So we're going to talk about Bloodshot history. I'm dying to talk Bloodshot history, but last I saw of you, you were in a bathrobe, drinking some few whiskey in a cabin, maybe the cabin you're in right now in the woods.
Yes.
Just
I have the, I didn't want to wear the robe again, I thought about it. It's right over there, but
it's quite becoming on you.
Thank you.
I said earlier when I was promoting this interview that we can make a drinking game out of this interview. Every time that John Langford or Robbie Fulks or Kelly Hogan are mentioned, you should take a drink.
Can do.
It seems like a pretty easy game to lose if you're drinking at home.
Losing is in the eye of the beholder.
It really is. So I don't know. I feel like this answer could go either way because I truly don't know. During the pandemic, how have things been? Have sales and streaming gone up or down? I feel like there's a case to be made for either happening, and I have no idea.
Early on, when there was still some sort of sense of novelty to this whole thing, the website was doing great. People were super supportive. Everyone was so desperate to reach out to the community, the creative community that they're a part of, and support them in any way they could. But now it's, we're in month 4 of this, 3, and things are starting to dwindle. And, even if streaming income went up 20%, who cares? Streaming income is next to nothing anyway.
Right.
So it's people, I think, are maybe there might be some sense of diminishing returns on all the online concerts, and there's just, I think, a fatigue to the whole thing.
It's something I'm feeling as a podcaster. I'm feeling the momentum of doing this every night kind of beginning to wane, and I'm like, well, do I keep doing this just to do it like this, or do I stagger this more? Because you're right, there was that wave of momentum. Everyone's online, everyone's streaming, everyone's performing, everyone's podcasting and chatting, and now everyone's like, okay, cool, we need to do something else now.
Yeah. And the first few weeks of getting all your friends or watching a 5-person band play from 5 different places, that was, again, there was a sense of community and a sense of survival and pulling together. But then you have so many of these meetings that just kind of
exactly.
And it's like, I'll just go read a book.
Well, how have you personally been doing?
I can't complain. I'm safe. We're healthy. The mental health issues are an entirely different matter, but compared to so many others, I can't complain.
How are the artists doing? And because obviously it sucks for bands right now.
It's catastrophic. I mean, this is their livelihood, and it didn't just, touring income didn't just slow down; it ceased.
Right.
It just hit a brick wall and disappeared. And no one can tell us when it will be back. Like the collapse of 2009. People keep asking me, in interviews, like, what are other grave moments, in Bloodshot's history? It's like, the collapse of 2008, 2009, September 11th. But those things seem to have a logical progression or a way out. And this, it depending on which websites you like to look at, it could be over already, or we're just in the beginning of this. And, as much as I would love to be in a crowded room with lots of like-minded music fans screaming along, that seems to be just about the stupidest thing in the world to do right now.
It does. So right at the onset, right as we're beginning this conversation, let's just say the website, Bandcamp, people can buy merch, support artists and the label that way. Lots of great vinyl stuff. Lots of artists. I've got Rookie behind me on
Yes,
display.
yes.
The recent
I got to say, Bandcamp has been unbelievable with their free days where they give all the money to the artists and the labels, and again, direct support to the artists' websites or to our website is the most helpful thing to do. I mean, the giant companies, you know who they are. I don't need to name them. They'll be around after this is all over, and they're doing better than ever. So they don't need your help. Small businesses in your community need your help. The bookstores, the restaurants, all and humble little endeavors like ours.
let's talk about starting your humble little endeavor. In the beginning, a label was never the idea when you put out that first compilation. Was it like a long-term career goal?
Absolutely not. It was a hobby. It was something to take my mind off my shitty day job, and it was something to potentially get us into shows for free.
There we go.
And if it made its money back, then all the better.
Well, it's interesting that period, 1994, the Chicago that you represented on that first compilation, very different from the Chicago that was being put on display on a national level. I mean, this was peak national interest on Chicago as a music center.
Peak Pumpkin.
Peak Pumpkins, Urge Overkill, Liz Phair, major label Feeding Frenzy. Things were nuts. That Chicago was different from the scene you represented. Part of the same, but certainly not necessarily what was on the top of mind of the music writers of America at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, every band that played the double door that had a big muff effects pedal was getting signed after their second show. And
it's true.
It was just a mob scene. And then I would go to Czar Bar or Deja Vu or Clearwater Saloon or something like that. And there would be these really cool bands and there'd be like 9 people there. And I thought there's this whole other thing going on that is being totally ignored. And it seemed like we could stitch that all together with kind of a compilation and see what would happen. And pretty quickly, people in Dallas and San Francisco and New York were like, hey, we've got all these kind of weird, rootsy, country-ish bands too that no one seems to care about. And I was like, oh, great. We've tapped into something that no one cares about all over the country.
When did you realize this is a business and my shitty day job can go away? Was it the Ryan Adams album or was it before then?
Well, those are kind of 2 different questions. The moment I realized that this was something that I could not just dismiss as a lark was when I think it was South by Southwest 1997, and I was sitting at La Zona Rosa with this person whose record had just come out the month before, her first record, Nico Case, and it was the end of South by, the traditional show that Alejandro Escovedo put on, and we had just released his first record with us, and it was packed, and it was all the industry sleaze bags, and I was nobody, and I was just, hopped up on trucker speed and tequila and just scared to death about the whole thing. And right before Alejandro came out, the PA, the announcer said, Bloodshot recording artist, Alejandro Escovedo. And the place went nuts. And I'm just describing it, the hair on my arm. And I was like, when an artist of the caliber of Alejandro Escovedo trusts you with his art, that is a serious partnership and a serious proposition.
And jumping around a little bit, that album he put out, I think it was 2001, Man Under the Influence.
Yes.
That's talk about a high watermark for.
Oh yeah. To have that in our to be responsible for shepherding that record out into the world. Oh, absolutely. I distinctly remember listening to the rough mixes of that on a plane on my Walkman. Or it might have been a Discman. No, it was a Walkman.
It might have been a
Um,
Discman.
and what?
It might have been a Discman.
It might have been a Discman.
Yeah.
And just being utterly floored by it. That record has not aged a day. It is a classic.
Oh my God, Castanet still. I mean, the song has teeth.
Absolutely.
Dennis, who's watching the Facebook Live, says Rookie, Vandaliers, Jason Hawk Harris, plus the many moods of Mr. Langford. God bless Bloodshot.
Oh, well, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about John Langford. When I hear John Langford, when I see John Langford, I'm still that kid hearing Memphis Egypt by the Mekons for the first time. And I can't believe that this is the same guy. And he's the super accessible, super talented, highly prolific, basically ambassador for this music, for this modern American insurgent country music.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time I heard the Waco Brothers. Actually, it was probably when I was producing Sound Opinions. It was like 1993, 1994, and they played Bad Times, and
yeah.
Just blew my mind. Tell me about your relationship with John, how you came to know him.
Well, I mean, like you, and maybe I don't want to extrapolate my experience to yours, but being a person who is fond of unpopular music, I was, of course, a fan of the Mekons. In college, my roommate at the time was a writer for the college paper, and he brought home Honky Tonkin to review, and he started playing it. I was like, what is this? And fast forward 30 something years later, he came. I did a radio show in college, and the Mekons on their first or second US tour, this would have been 88 or something, they came down to my radio show, and I went to go see him, and that was the first time I saw him, and I just, like everyone, both fell in love with and feared both Sally and Susie, and was just amazed by how terrible and amazing they were, sometimes within the same song. And they came down to my radio show, and then after the show at the Blind Pig in Ann Arbor, they wrecked their van on the way to East Lansing, and John remembered that, and then we asked him to be on the first compilation, and we can't get rid of him.
He's fantastic. And I mentioned the other two pillars of this drinking game. Kelly Hogan was your first employee. Is that right?
That is correct. Kelly Hogan was our first paid employee. She drew a paycheck before we did. I think it was $500 a month.
And at that point, it was just a labor of love for you, as you were.
Yeah. We were still sinking. We still had the day. I still had the by that time maybe half day job, and was just all the money was going back into the label. And she moved up here. We had mutual friends. I did not know she was a singer. And her first day on the job, we kept getting phone calls from like Rolling Stone or Spin or a guy at Billboard. And we were like, why are they calling us? They never return our calls. And they wanted to talk to Kelly. And we're like, who are you? Who is this person? And then she worked there for a year and a half, and was pretty directly responsible for us signing Nico. Because she got somebody sent us her Nico's demo, or her first album when it was released in Canada, and Kelly wouldn't stop playing it, to the point where, like with the light bulb being shined in your face, you just finally break down and confess and go, okay, we'll do it. And it was like a weird moment of clarity that took several beatings over my head for me to get it. And then we saw Kelly at Shuba's, and I think it was either John Wesley Harding, she will correct me on this, or Dale Watson was playing, and they had Kelly come up and sing with her, and she got off stage and came up to me, and I fired her because I was like, you have to sing. You can't be working at a dumb little label. You have to be singing.
The job was holding her back.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I could listen to Drunkard's Blues every day of the week.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's so great. Insurgent country. My son, who is a late teen, he is finding his way through American music and outlaw country. And I said, oh, let me introduce you to some other songs. And I use the term insurgent country, the Bloodshot term. He's like, oh, that sounds badass. But it is. I mean, you really nailed it. And, it's not cowpunk or whatever, you alternative. Insurgent country, was that just an epiphany? Was that something you spent a night brainstorming? How did that term come about?
That was the result of myself and Eric Babcock, who was one of the original founders. We were both English majors, and it was a lot of drinking with a thesaurus, quite honestly, in my backyard. And
All good things begin.
Roger, he's quite the guy.
What's another word for Roger?
Oh, brother.
So let's talk a little bit more about.
And so to go back to that, like we were looking, because we were doing this thing, but the C word, Carrie, was such a loaded term. I mean, people reacted to it, especially in the underground, and punk scenes. It had such a stink to it. So we had to find something that had that kind of rebellious spirit to it to put in front of it, so people might be like, oh, this isn't Billy Ray Cyrus. Okay, maybe I'll give this a listen.
You have the Bottle Rockets. I love that you reissued their early stuff. I was just thinking today, there's a song on one of those early albums called Gravity Fails. My favorite double entendre in music history for the past 30 years. Maybe it's something in my genes. Maybe it's something in my genes. I love those guys.
Yeah, they are.
Still holds up. I mean,
those two records are, again, cornerstones of this kind of music, but they have not aged. I mean, those things, those records are amazing. And to be able to reissue them, I mean, it took them forever to get them out of the clutches of their previous labels. And they were just sitting there, they weren't available for 10 or 15 years, and they didn't have any control over that. And as a label geek, it kills you when you see that kind of stuff happen. So to be able, again, for these guys that I've known for 20, 25 years now at this point, mostly as a fan early on, where I would be, too intimidated to really even talk to them, to have them, again, entrust us with their art is deeply gratifying.
And they're kind of an honorary Chicago band. I mean, they're a Missouri band, but we've kind of claimed them as our own.
Yeah, speak for yourself. Keep them in Missouri.
One of the challenges a smaller label has is putting out an album that blows up and then seeing that artist move on to a bigger label or a higher paying label after that record blows up. Old 97s, the Ryan Adams solo experience. Let's start with Old 97s. How did you find them?
Well, I disagree with your premise, but I will answer that question.
Let's start there. Tell me about disagreeing with me.
Well, you say that it's disappointing when a band goes on to a bigger label. For us, I mean, I consider it a victory, because I don't want to be much bigger than we are. We've always wanted to maintain a scale that is comfortable for us, and I don't want to get so big that success demands more success to keep up at that level. I would prefer to keep it kind of a family affair, and if someone goes on to a bigger label, that's what you want to happen. That's a success for everyone. A rising tide lifts all boats. And when Ryan's record broke, I mean, that allowed us to try a lot of admittedly dumb things with some bands that never had a chance but that we loved. But it also allowed us to put money in a rainy day fund, or it allowed us to support Nico's records in a more vigorous fashion. So, again, like when Ryan really hit, like people were like, oh, you need to hire more staff. You need to do this. You need to buy, office furniture with brass armrests and potted plants. And, this is a meeting table, this thing you pulled out of the alley on Irving. And I'm like, yeah, this is what we want to do. So I don't, yeah, again, it's like if you become a victim of that boom mentality, then, the bust inevitably comes. And how many labels have you seen, or how many bands you've seen that have just like tried to go with this exponential growth, and then, it just collapses on itself.
That is the most Chicago answer ever, which is great. I mean, this is why this label can exist in Chicago. No
Yeah,
affectation.
that is true. I'll go along with that. I mean, we would not have survived in any of the company towns like New York, LA, or Nashville, because there is that, you know, uh, command to grow. And yeah, I think it was Edward Abbey that said the only thing that grows just for the sake of growing is a cancer cell. And so I don't want to do that. So we
So
keep it comfortable. When like Justin Townes Earl like wants to move on, it's like we understand our limitations as a label. We're not gonna jeopardize the careers of the Langfords and the Hogans and the Folkses, um, so that we can all of a sudden spend a lot of money flying publicists around the country, or buying life-size cardboard cutouts, or doing all kinds of stupid things. We appreciate what they did. We keep a good relationship. They move on, and then the cycle continues. When Justin's records broke really well, then that allowed us to invest in Lydia Lovelace, and it just goes on like that.
old 97s, just to drop anchor on them for a minute. I think it's hard to argue just the songwriting talent of Red Miller. His lyrics are unmatched. I mean, his turns of
You
phrase
could argue it, but you would be wrong.
his lyric writing is just, it blows me away. It's highly quotable, sing-alongable. Even on Wreck Your Life, Victoria is still, I mean, it's a standard
Yeah.
in the
Oh
old
yeah.
one's catalog.
And for people, before I moved to Chicago, I spent a while being a production manager and a stage manager and a tour manager, and I spent a lot of time around musicians at their unguarded moments, um, through their day. Some of them were heroes of mine. Some of them I loved as artists, and some of them were just unrelenting assholes. And so when you talk about the old 97s, I have to say that, as nice as they are talented, as straight up human beings as you're going to meet in this racket.
Well, as you answered the last question about bands moving on, you described your reasoning in a very Chicago way, in a very blue collar city kind of way. Based on that, I've got to think that as a label, you're probably not signing many people who you don't personally enjoy. Like, my
Why
guess,
why on earth would I do that anyway?
exactly, exactly. But you have to love them artistically and personally, don't you, to invite them under your umbrella?
Well, I mean, I guess I wouldn't go so far as to say I have to be buddies with them, but I have to respect them as people. Um, and really, why, it's too hard a business already. So why would you get into this with people you don't like? And for me, it may not be utterly nakedly transparent to other people, but it feels like it is to me, that if I looked at someone and went, "Oh, that's going to do well," to sign them for that is just, it's a disingenuous premise for all involved. And I think it's very transparent to fans, as well as the interpersonal stuff. I mean, some of the people we work with are kind of hard to get along, but I really like their music and I believe in working with them. I find that it has merit, so I will put up with the people who are somehow impossibly even more sarcastic than I am, or something.
Let's talk about Robbie Folks. Truly one of the area's great. One of the
Not that
areas,
I was talking about him.
oh my, he is one of the great troubadours, one of the great storytellers and performers. Talk to me about Robbie.
That Robbie is not a household name, that he is not covered by a whole spectrum of artists from all genres, is a is an is empirical evidence that we as a culture have really, really bad taste.
I don't disagree.
I mean, he's a master writer. He can play and turn micro genres on their heads, but still bring them, and without belittling them. Uh, and he's an unbelievable guitar player.
Absolutely. Through the years, you've taken chances, you've done different things. One thing I've wanted to ask you for 9 years, the JC Brooks put out some fantastic music on Bloodshot. Was there, this is like classic R&B and soul, very different from the insurgent country we came to know. Was there a push at that point, and is there a push today to kind of stretch the limits of who you are perceptually?
Yeah. I go through life thinking that everyone's record collection has as much diversity as mine. And I've found that that is not true. So that first JC Brooks record and when I would see them live, that was right in my sweet spot. I mean, right now, what is getting me through the past couple of months has been the Stax Volt singles collection on, what is it? I think 312 CDs. I'm just going through that, and it's a gift that never stops giving.
I love that old sound.
Oh yeah, yeah, and so I mean, I can connect all the releases together. Yeah, it was a stretch for some people, but it was right in my sonic sweet spot. I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, early on, when the first Old 97s record hit, everyone wanted people. I mean, there was a certain segment of the population, that whole No Depression crowd or whatever, that wanted us to just do nothing but make records that sounded like Wreck Your Life over and over and over and over again, which would be incredibly boring. The first time I heard that doesn't sound like a Bloodshot band was for Robbie Folks's first record with us. I heard it when we signed Alejandro. I heard it when we signed Nico. It was like, it's like people like wanted us to be this very narrow thing, and they decided what could and could not be a Bloodshot band. And nothing brings out the contrarian in me quicker than telling me you can't do that. It goes back to my punk rock days, where it's like, oh, well, this is, you're into punk rock. You can't like, Peter Tosh, or you can't like Jimmy Cliff, or you can't like, Devo. I was like, I thought the whole thing was about freedom and expression and doing what you liked. And so when people wanted to early on pigeonhole us, we did do a couple of things that were pointed reactions to that. But JC Brooks was not one of them. That was just like a band and an album that I really dug, and they were in Chicago, and why not?
They would turn venues upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, now we've got we've had Barons Whitfield and the Savages for a while, which could not be, less alternative country or whatever. But I saw him in college a few times, and man, that guy is as punk as they come, and happy to have him on board. I mean,
and this is kind of where I'm going. The insurgent country, when I heard JC Brooks, I'm like, okay, that doesn't fit that definition, but I get it from a American music baseline modernized for the 21st century. Like that is the roots of American music. Yeah, it's not country, but it's a kindred spirit in the sense that it draws from everything that was built as foundation in the 1950s and 1960s.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, internally, we haven't used the term insurgent country for a long time, because it did become something of a straitjacket, and people were like, oh, well, this isn't insurgent country. I'm like, who are you to tell me what the term we coined means? And so it just got too annoying. So we dropped it. Now it's just like, underground roots or whatever. And the other thing that's getting me through these times is the Harry Smith anthology of folk music, so that's just all over the place. So yeah, I mean, stylistic straitjackets or genre fascists have never really
see, I'm right there with you. This podcast, I mean, yesterday's podcast, spoke for about an hour on pop punk. We're talking about Bloodshot artists today. I had Ramsey Lewis on 2 weeks ago. I've had metal bands like Nonpoint and Veil of Maya, because like you, if you go into my phone, it's insane. It's
Yeah, I mean, it's
all over the
and I don't know if it's I know rap music has it, but there's this whole like tedious argument by self-appointed arbiters of authenticity that
I love talking to an English major, by the way.
um, I've been on so many panels and stuff or interviews where it's like, well, how do you define who can? I'm like, whoever does it well. I mean, over the years, like so many people have busted our chops. We've got about Langford, like how dare this Welshman come and tell us what country music is? He's not telling us what it is. He's doing it the way he wants to. He's doing it the way he heard it. I mean, the Ramones wanted to be the Beach Boys, but they weren't good enough players, so it came out sounding like the Ramones, and that's a pretty good thing. So if you are an idiot punk rocker and you pick up a Hank Williams box set and all of a sudden you're like obsessed with Hank Williams and you're going to try and do that, you're going to come out with something completely different. So why bother wasting your time with like, are you allowed to play this music? Are you allowed to be influenced by this music? Oh, don't get me started. You're lucky we're not in a car right now, because I'd be.
Well, I'm not lucky we're not in the car, because we'd be having a yummy meal together. It's a bummer. So we talked about some of the big pillars of Bloodshot, some of the obvious ones, Langford and Alejandro. Let's talk about, since we have people listening, we have people watching, and we talked about the need to support you, or the desire to support you and keep this label afloat, this local independent label. Let's talk about some artists that people may not be familiar with, that maybe if they're looking to dive in, maybe they can grab a record off your website or Bandcamp. What are some of those releases that you feel like, oh man, I wish people were aware, like we're more aware of this, because it's just so good?
A lot of what we do is by its very nature, because by their very nature, indie label owners are very idiosyncratic. A lot of these bands never have a chance to break it into the mainstream, and that's fine. I love them just the same. But then there are a lot of other bands that it mystifies me why they weren't more popular. So I could talk about Trailer Bride and Devil in a Woodpile till I'm blue in the face, but those were oddball bands that appealed to my extremely oddball sensitivities. But bands like the Blacks, I thought, were one of the best live bands, and
the bass,
they just didn't have it right together, and those records are fantastic. Bobby Bear Jr.
Bobby Bear Jr., of course.
One of our recent releases came out last year, Jason Hawk Harris, just a fantastic, nuanced, beautiful, compelling musician. I mean, music. He's not a beautiful musician. Well, I guess some people might think. Anyway,
it's inside that counts.
And Rookie, right over there behind you. I mean, these guys are, who knows what. So their record came out the day that the city closed down. Their sold out release show was all canceled. Yeah. And when people hear that, we've had friends who, outside of the industry, who follow what we do on kind of a casual level, who have been coming to me going, this Rookie band is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I can't wait till you can see them sometime.
Oh, it's so, I had one a few months ago. It's just this wonderful breezy guitar rock album, melodies for days.
You kind of just made them sound like Seals and Croft, but
a lot more edge than Seals and Croft. It's like Firefall, but heavy.
Wow. You trumped my Seals and Croft with a Firefall.
Yeah, you want to go yacht rock with me, Rob Miller? You want to go yacht rock?
Ouch. Right before South by this year, writers and media people who don't typically return our phone calls were calling us about Rookie. Like, where can we see them at South by? And I was like, wow, this is, it's rare that talent and acclaim come together, and it seemed like it was merging very nicely on this one, and then everything fell apart.
And the audience will be there when we all emerge from our cocoons and when it's safe to do so. It's funny, right before I think before the record came out, I saw a review of the Rookie album in Classic Rock magazine, which is, I swear to God, one of my favorite magazines in the world. It's a British
Yeah.
magazine.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know you're well aware of the magazine, but I love seeing this. It was a capsule review of the Rookie album. I'm like, holy shit. Then, of course, you did a sampler with Classic Rock not long after that.
Yeah.
I wish magazines like that were made in America still.
Oh, those guys are great. I was actually in London a few years ago, and I went over to their flat and was hanging out, and they were like, oh, let's go get some pints. And I was like, of course, let's go get some pints. And we walked out onto the street. It was in Notting Hill, and we were going to turn right, which in British is right. And there was this house that was surrounded by police, just not doing anything, just kind of surrounded. And there's some people milling around, and they're like, oh, we can't go that way, the street's blocked off. Liam, or no, one of the Gallagher brothers was under house arrest, and he lived down the street, and there was some kind of big and I was like, oh, okay, so we had to go left.
They're right there, made the trip to the UK worthwhile. That's it. That's what you want. But my point was, I love the magazine because it's respectful of everything that came before, and it has a very forward-thinking vision. I thought, man, Rookie, what a great pickup.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Again, not like classic alternative country, whatever that is, but when the first time I saw them live was at our 25th anniversary party at the Smash Plastic space on Diversey, where we get where their LP was made, and I was like, man, these guys are like kind of like a hillbilly Deep Purple, and I mean that in entirely a good way.
That's the elevator pitch right there. That's all you need.
And I was like, man, these guys are bringing that like fucked up 70s boogie thing with some like southernness to it, and I was like, oh, I'm in.
I from now on will only use hillbilly Deep Purple. It's a much more respectful way to describe the band. But the album is so good, and that is a recent Bloodshot, super recent Bloodshot release, and you can buy the vinyl, you can stream it. Of course, there are samplers and compilations, which is a great place to start, and you have everything on your Bandcamp page. But I'd recommend once you find something, once you lock into something on one of those compilations, dig deeper into the artist, because there's just so much. We can't possibly talk about every artist on your label, but there's just so much good stuff.
Thank you.
And very different sounding from artists.
And 26 years in, like, people keep asking, how do you keep doing it? It's because things like Rookie fall in your lap, where you just feel that excitement of discovery, that has not gone away. And the first time I saw Jason Hawk Harris, oh my God, I was just full. It was at our South by showcase a couple of years ago, and at the Continental Club, and I was like, this is incredible. And
I saw the
that's still there.
I saw the Vandaliers for my first time last year, and out in Joliet. I've never seen a band like that. I mean, that's just heavy violin rock. I mean, that was magnificent.
Yeah, it's like, punk Tex-Mex or something. Yeah, it's
awesome.
Yeah, when they played this festival out on the East Coast I went to last summer. They opened for the Mekons, and the Mekon, everyone was there for the Mekons. But by the time the Vandaliers were done, people were like, I need to go sit down. Yeah. They took that venue and tore it up into little pieces, and it was so much fun to watch people who are. I mean, that's the thing for me, like being the dork who stands off the wings, to watch an audience be unexpectedly floored is so much fun. Like they're there because they're there for the band after them, and then all of a sudden they are just brought in to the moment, and you see that people are as excited about it as you are. That's the first time Robbie Folks, when he opened for Dave Alvin at Fitzgerald's like a billion years ago, everyone was there for Dave Alvin. But by halfway through Robbie's set, people were completely on his side and just going, "What am I seeing?
Right.
What am I hearing? This is amazing." And
Well, that's what we as music fans hope for. We
Yeah.
walk into every show that we don't know the opener, praying that we have that transcendent, holy shit, what did I just witness?
yeah,
Spirit.
I want every day. I want to hear Howlin' Wolf for the first time every day.
On a related note, Smokestack Lightning, one of my favorite guitar riffs in all music history.
Hubert
Never...
Sumlin has many of them.
True. All right. So the Bandcamp page, Bloodshot, it's just bloodshotrecords.bandcamp?
Records.com. I don't know the Bandcamp.
But search Bloodshot and it's all a universe.
And I think they're having another free day on July 3rd is what I believe is happening. So
that's how I got my Rookie album.
Well, thank you very much. And I can't get out of this without saying, back when I had my shitty day job, which was like drywalling and painting houses on the north side and in Wrigleyville and, in Rogers Park and Evanston and stuff, Q101 all day long. That's where I heard Radiohead and Breeders and all that kind of stuff for the first time. So,
and I was there playing Bloodshot music in the middle of the night on Sunday night when all the ne'er-do-wells and dangerous loners were listening. So,
like me.
Yeah, right. That's our crowd. I do want to thank everyone who's been watching on Facebook Live. Much appreciated. The podcast will exist on carquincarne.com and all podcast platforms and YouTube. But I am going to kill the Facebook Live